I am a 19-year-old girl studying geology at university. I have a boyfriend named William who is 6 years older than me. I don't really like socializing with classmates of my age. They seem boring and uninteresting to me. I usually choose older people as my friends. I think it is better to talk to teachers at recess than to have empty conversations with classmates. I feel that older people have more experience and depth, and I can have more meaningful conversations with them. They make me think about different points of view, and I appreciate that more than the empty discussions my peers often have. I really enjoy learning. I was an excellent student in school, and even now I have a very good academic record. Because of this, some people dislike me. They often think I'm arrogant or too serious, but really I just value my education highly. Tonight I had to stay late after class to help my professor, Mr. Adams, with a research paper. I called William and asked if he could pick me up from the university a few hours later than usual. He didn't mind. William is always supportive of my endeavors, and I am very grateful to him for that. He understands how important my studies are to me and never complains, even when my schedule becomes overwhelming. I sat with Mr. Adams in the faculty lounge, typing line after line of a paper on my laptop. Mr. Adams was a young, handsome man of about 35, with curly dark hair, light stubble, and sharp cheekbones. He was always well-dressed, usually in neatly ironed shirts and pants, which gave him an added charm. He had a certain charisma that made people respect him, and I admired his intelligence and dedication. He sighed after an hour of work, leaning back in his chair. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the fatigue coming over me. "I think I need a break," he said, standing up and walking over to the coffee maker. The room was quiet, and I could hear the distant sounds of students in the hallways. The evening had turned to night, and the campus seemed deserted. "With or without sugar?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. "No thanks, I don't want any," I replied, continuing to read the book in front of me. The coffee maker vibrated loudly in the silence of the room as he pressed the button. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and I felt a little more awake. He smiled, placing a steaming cup of coffee next to me. "I already poured it," he said, and his eyes lingered on me for a moment longer than I expected. I took a sip of the fresh coffee, still looking at my book, but feeling his gaze on me as he sipped the drink. I felt a little uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore it. Eventually I closed the book and set it aside, glaring at him. An awkward silence hung between us, which made my heart beat a little faster. "Let's get on with it," I said, trying to bring the moment back to work. I sat next to him, wearing a dress above my knees, crossing my legs. I adjusted my position, feeling a little awkward under his gaze. He was looking at me in a way that made me feel both nervous and intrigued. "Let's talk a little about you," Mr. Adams suggested, leaning back in his chair. I was surprised by his request, but figured he just wanted to relax a little. I started telling him about my studies and a few of my hobbies. I mentioned my love of hiking and that I often take long walks to air out my brain. He listened intently, nodding and asking questions here and there, but his eyes never strayed from mine. "Married?" he asked with a smile, his tone casual but curious. "No, but in a relationship," I replied, glancing at the wedding ring on his finger. He noticed my gaze and quickly tucked his hand into his pocket, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "Do you like me?" asked Mr. Adams, moving closer, his voice lowered almost to a whisper. I'd never given it much thought. Yes, he was a handsome man, but I was in a relationship and he was married. I remained silent, feeling a mixture of emotions, confusion, curiosity, and a little fear. I tried to move toward the door, but he stood up, blocking my path, and put his arm around my shoulders. His touch was gentle, but it made my heart race. "Don't be afraid of me. I won't do anything bad," he said quietly, looking into my eyes. Then he leaned in and kissed me. It was like an electric shock. Goosebumps covered my skin. My mind went blank for a moment, and I felt myself melting into the kiss despite the warning bells in my head. He obviously knew how to convince me. He pulled me to him and sat me on his lap. His hands were firm but gentle as they moved to my waist. I could feel his breath on my neck, and it sent shivers down my spine. I hurriedly buttoned my shirt, 1,000 thoughts flashing through my mind. What was I doing? My boyfriend, William, had already come to pick me up and was calling for the 5th time, his name flashing on my phone screen. I quickly grabbed my bag and rushed out of the office, my heart pounding. As I stepped out into the hallway, the cold air hit my face, and I felt a strange mix of emotions: guilt, excitement, and fear. I saw William's car parked outside the house, his figure waiting patiently behind the wheel. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself before walking toward him. I knew I should smile and act like nothing had happened, but in the back of my mind I could feel a knot forming in my stomach. When I got into the car, William greeted me with his usual warm smile. "Hey, how was work with Mr. Adams?" he asked, his voice full of genuine interest. I forced myself to smile, my heart still pounding from what had just happened. "It was fine," I replied, trying to sound as normal as possible. He nodded and got behind the wheel, his hand squeezing mine reassuringly. I stared out the window, watching the darkening streets, my mind replaying the events of the evening over and over again. The weight of what had happened was weighing on me, and I couldn't help but wonder what it would mean for my relationship with William and with Mr. Adams.